more. Hey, Cillian, can you hear?
Yes, I
Hello.
hear you loud and clear. Hear you loud and clear. Good morning.
Hello, Cillian. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually, although our institution is Brussels-based, I'm joining you from Ireland, from the southwest coast of Ireland, a place called West Cork.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's 10 and the stage is yours. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you very much. I'm really honoured to be invited here today as part of the event and to give some opening remarks on the exciting prospects that I think are offered by this concept of transforming our linear economy to a circular one. And I know you've already had some really good sessions and more lined up throughout the day today, as you just said. But let me tell you why I'm here and why I presume I was invited to speak to you, by telling you through a personal story that links to the circular economy about the institution I represent, and I'll then share some examples of our work and some of my own thoughts with you, if you'll permit me. So, as you said, I'm currently Vice President of the European Economic and Social Committee, and that's an institution within the EU structures. It's an advisory body to the other EU institutions, so the well-known ones like the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Council. And it's a really good concept, actually, this Economic and Social Committee, because the idea is that real-life people like me meet regularly to discuss and debate policy proposals and to write reports, which we call opinions, that feed into the formation of these policies. And the really interesting part is that we have members, about 350 members from every member state, and from large business federations, from SMEs, entrepreneurs, workers groups and trade unions. We have members from consumer groups or disability organizations, or like me, an environmental NGO, and farmers represented, and many more. So when we discuss a policy proposal, we represent many different perspectives and viewpoints, but we work to build a consensus view across all those different interest groups, and we work to find practical proposals that will improve whichever the policy or directive is that we're writing our opinion on. And we're really busy because we do this for every single proposal that comes out of the European Commission. So when the Circular Economy Action Plan was proposed way back now in December 2015, I was appointed to lead the writing of the EESC opinion. So I was appointed as rapporteur for that piece of work. And it was an exciting moment for me because at the time I was newly appointed to the EESC, and coming from an environmental NGO, as you mentioned, that works on greening the economy, this was really right up my street. So as it was my first opinion, I decided to try and be bold and ambitious. Well, actually, I think it may have been naivety, but I rather retell the story and paint myself as bold and ambitious, because obviously that sounds a lot better. But either way, I suggested in that opinion that we should have a joint project between the European Economic and Social Committee and the European Commission, and we should call it the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And this idea was taken up by two commissioners at the time, Mr. Timmermans and Mr. Katainen. And this platform was born and lives on today, growing stronger and stronger. So what is it? Well, for the most part, it's a digital platform. It exists online, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a second. But also we physically meet once a year for our annual 2-day Circular Economy Conference. And we also didn't want to just have a conference and then all go home and browse the website until the following year. So we established a coordination group, and there we have 24 people who represent groups active in circular economy, in real life, on the ground actors and stakeholders. And that ranges again from national and sectoral networks to local government to research and academic groups and think tanks. So these stakeholders meet between the conferences and have a work plan, or they're active arranging projects like what we call EU circular talks on specific areas of circular economy. So basically the whole project is about sharing expertise, and I think that's really important as we move into a circular economy. The project is about learning from each other, and it's about, importantly, identifying what are the barriers to transitioning to a circular economy, because I think that's a key element when, and I'm sure we'll see this throughout the speakers today, that sometimes there can be legislation or policy in place that is preventing a company, a business, or an organization moving to a circular model, and that isn't necessarily the intention of the policy, but it's the experience of those who are active in the space. And it's really important, I think, to have an official space within the EU institutions to be able to identify those barriers and try and do something about it. Within our website, which I'd encourage you to go and visit, the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, we have a searchable database of good practices. We have a repository of information on regional and national strategies. So that's all located in an area called the knowledge base. And that really is a go-to space for finding out what's happening across Europe in the circular economy. And because this is a joint project with the European Commission, it's where the Commission are going to see what's happening on the ground also. We've included there on this digital space on the website a toolbox for all to access with information on very useful things like financing the circular economy and opportunities in education and training. And within the good practice space of it, you will know one of your panelists later on this morning from Concular, the digital platform enabling circular construction, is listed there as one of our one of the good practices that we try and share with everyone across the EU. And this is used, of course, beyond the EU as well. I've traveled in South America, in New York. I know that the mayor's office there are looking at our digital platform and saying this is a good way to have stakeholders engaged as we develop a circular economy. And Concular, as an example, is a kind of a business that disrupts the construction industry in a very positive way by developing a circular process for material flow. And the system is based on an AI-driven platform that matches buyers' demand for construction material with the suppliers who have these circular materials. So material demands from construction projects can be uploaded onto the platform, while circular materials from demolition projects can be recorded using a digital material passport. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that later as we go on. I also note Zero Waste are represented today as well, and they're also very active within the circular economy stakeholder platform. Now, I mentioned as well that the platform does things like circular talks, and I wanted to share all of this with you today so that you're aware of some of the different things that are going on Europe-wide, and that as an institution that we're trying to facilitate, because I think this is a really good space for as many people as possible to be aware of. The circular talks, for example, we have one focused on a digital product pass, and digitalization needs to advance transparency and responsibility along product chains. I think that's a real opportunity for digitalization within the circular economy space. And at the EESC, we've welcomed the European Green Deal proposal, which was reiterated by the German government in its recent digital policy agenda for the environment, to establish this type of digital product pass with information on the materials and on the standards in production to identify shortcomings in sustainability production, in line with the European CSR strategy, including labour standards. So I explained to you how we produce opinions at the EESC, such as the one on the Circular Economy Action Plan. These are in response to the legislative proposals, but we also have a few other means of producing work or producing opinions. And sometimes we can propose an initiative of our own based on where we identify gaps, but sometimes we get invited by the European Parliament or by the European Council to write an opinion. And last year, at the end of last year, during the German presidency of the European Council, we were invited by them to write an opinion on digitalization and sustainability. And I was lucky enough to chair that group, so I was quite involved in the work that was done. And to give you an idea of some of the technical things that the European Economic and Social Committee puts on the table for discussion and to try and influence policy, that opinion details some of those. So in it, we stress that the EU must ensure that digitalization helps to deliver the European Green Deal. And we always make a point of calling it the European Green and Social Deal. And we're trying to make that stick because it needs to have a social element to it also. We also talk about a sustainable well-being economy built on a systemic approach to sustainable consumption. And there we've called on national and local governments to support cooperative sharing platforms, as well as e-commerce platforms that offer sustainable products, operating as kind of neutral intermediaries to better distribute benefits amongst producers or service providers, and also to include citizens and consumers in the governance and the decision making and the benefit sharing. So we've called there for political support to help those kind of platforms to scale across Europe. And equally, we call for more transparency in ICT production chains. We need an extension of the EU Eco-Design Directive to include comprehensive production standards. So I've also done work in this space, and I think it's important to share with you today the importance of eco-design in driving the transition to a circular economy, the need to have sustainable materials, the need to have products designed that maximizes the longevity of the product, that allows devices to be modular and repairable so that you can retrieve the useful raw materials that are in a product and use them as a secondary raw material to promote a remanufacturing that can take place locally all over Europe. And we push again for things like extended warranty periods or for software updates to last until the end of a product's physical lifetime. I'm sure we've all experienced difficulties in that space. And so, you know, this includes things like ambitious energy standards. So having a dynamic top runner regulation in which the most energy efficient product becomes the absolute minimum standard. So the ESE always pushes for these circular products to be affordable and accessible to all, so that the circular option does not become a status symbol for the well-off in society, but rather the default for all. And I think that's a huge challenge in our discussions, that we make circular products accessible for everybody, and that they don't become like something that's happened sometimes with sustainable products or with very green products, particularly in the food area, where they're more expensive and therefore they're not accessible to poorer people in society, or even to low wage earners. Or we must ensure that circularity does not become this sort of exclusive high-end product, but rather the default. And in terms of digitalization, well, it's a really cross-cutting issue here, and I think it can be a tool for achieving the other themes of your conference. So I know we're talking over these couple of days also about circular cities and shifting towards global participation, and I think digitalization cuts across those, because it can be a tool for achieving those other things, or it can be used within designs of circular cities, or it can be used within new models of global participation to facilitate those happening more rapidly and to facilitate those happening more effectively. But a word of caution is also important when it comes to digitalization. So just because it's digital, just because it's high tech, does not mean that it's automatically the best solution, in the sense that it does not mean that the most sustainable or the most appropriate circular solution is always the digital one. I think we are very clear about the opportunities afforded by this, but there can be low-tech, non-digital solutions that also may, in some cases, be appropriate. So we must not lose the indigenous knowledge and lessons about living in harmony with our environment that can come from the way communities may have lived in the past. So digitalization should be an additional improvement where appropriate, but not as the only option, to the exclusion of those who either can't afford it or don't yet have the technological infrastructure to support it. So as a very basic example of what I mean by that, if you take a rural family who traditionally had a few pigs in the yard, the pigs can be a useful means of dealing with excess food waste or biodegradable waste from the household. And it may be that a small, intelligent biodigester or composter may be a more technological or more digital alternative to the pig. But we must remember that in some cases, the very low-tech pig may be the more suitable solution, even if it's just in a cultural sense, but also for additional benefits experienced by having something like a pig on your land in terms of turning over soil or fertilizing it or whatever. It's just to say that we must always consider the practicalities of rolling out digital solutions and consider those communities, people who may not yet have access to technological infrastructure or resources to afford the digital high-tech solutions. So coming to a close, I just wanted to frame my intervention today in the context of the massive environmental crisis that we currently face. I mean, we now know that we have extracted raw materials from the planet at a rate that far exceeds the planet's ability to regenerate those resources. That in itself is alarming enough and should be cause for an urgent, dramatic rethink of how we function. But the reality is even worse than that. Our processes of extraction of raw materials have caused localized habitat destruction and biodiversity collapse. Our industrial manufacturing processes have been traditionally powered by fossil fuels, the epitome of a linear energy source, causing the direct release of gases into our atmosphere that we now know have had this greenhouse effect, resulting in alterations to our climate system that will be detrimental and already have been detrimental to many sectors, communities, and regions. These activities, I've no doubt, were never a deliberate, concerted effort to destroy our planet, of course, or to make Earth inhospitable to humans. But these activities also brought surpluses, they brought growth, they raised many people out of poverty, allowed for social advancement and economic prosperity. But it's now clear that all of this has come at a cost that threatens the very functioning of the biological life support systems that as a species we're dependent upon. So the challenge we face is to redesign those very systems in order to turn this around. It's always been said, well, we can't just stop everything and then recreate completely new systems. And that's true. We've come close in this last year to a stop in many ways, but it's not led to systemic change. If anything, this pause due to the pandemic has made us all very keen to get back out there, to get back to travel and networking, to get back to shopping and socializing, to get back to holidaying and to sport. The International Energy Agency earlier this week in their Global Energy Review says that we're on course for the second largest increase in history in annual carbon emissions in 2021. And that doesn't sound like that this pause has been a great reset that some thought it would be and hoped it would be. And to be clear, in a personal capacity, I advocate for designing well thought out systems that would reset what we have so that we can achieve governing structures and societal structures that function more effectively to deliver equality, prosperity as part of a wider ecosystem. And I'm sure you're all familiar with a particular young activist's cry that the house is on fire. Well, the challenge we all face is that we have to rebuild that house while still living in it, while still sleeping, eating, working, and moving around. And this, I think, is where the circular economy and digitalization comes in. The shift to a circular economy, I see it as a gentle revolution. Yes, it's disruptive, and yes, it will create enormous changes in how we use raw materials and how we manufacture or even remanufacture, in how we consume, or maybe we're no longer consumers, but just users of goods and services. But it's gentle in the sense that it doesn't require a catastrophic stop in order to restart as a circular economy. It can be gradually introduced. It can build momentum and reach a tipping point of its own, where we then see the mass changes that will ultimately be transformative. And I think your event here is part of that gentle revolution to create transformation. I see you have a really interesting day ahead with the right mix of panels and speakers to really build this active network and challenge the status quo. The fact that this conference is a student-led event is also cause for great hope and admiration from me. At the EESC, we continually champion the voice of youth, and we're working to create youth roundtables on sustainability and climate so that your generation are given the opportunities to be at the decision-making tables. Indeed, one of our members of the coordination group that I mentioned earlier for the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is Generation Climate Europe. The power of younger people, of active participation in our democratic processes should never be underestimated. So I thank you for your patience listening to me. Really look forward to meeting many of you again, I hope, as we all work together for building this circular economy that we really need. And good luck for the rest of the event, and congratulations on what you've put together here over these few days. And I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Cillian. That was a really lovely keynote. And yes, really motivated that we as youth can impact such a change. Also, we have a couple of questions out here. And let's start with the first one. How does the EU engage with local level partners like city governments and so?
Yeah, well, of course, I can't speak for the whole of the EU, but I'm conscious that I'm representing one of the institutions here. So I can tell you that within our institution, we engage. It's a key part of our work to engage with local actors. So that's why I wanted to share with you about the platform that we created, because there we bring in local partners who are active on the ground, and we fund them with the European Commission to be able to come into the decision-making rooms and to share their experiences. Equally, each one of our over 300 members at the Economic and Social Committee represent a network back in their member state. So so, for example, I'm a CEO of an environmental NGO, but I'm part of an Irish network of environmental NGOs. And that network was the body that appointed me to be a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. So you multiply that out by 329 for all our members, and you can see that we're reaching a huge number of actors within that. We also then have a number of different events where we regularly invite in different stakeholders, different groups, local government, for example, or sectoral networks and so on, to ensure that we're trying to be that bridge between real life happening on the ground and what can be a bubble of politics within Brussels. So I think it helps the fact that, okay, I'm locked down here at the moment in Ireland, but even pre-COVID, I would go to Brussels sometimes for work and for meetings, but I always come back home and do my job at home here. So it helps keep one foot in on the ground, and I was going to say in reality, but not to suggest that the EU isn't in reality, but you know what I mean. It connects back with everyday life and real people. So yeah, I think that's how we do it within the committee.
Our next question is, which part of the system do you think should be redesigned first? Yeah, you mentioned that there should be a slow and gradual change towards it. So which part of the system would you suggest would be the ideal one to start with?
Wow. Well, I think I mean, I could talk for hours about that, but let's say in the context of circular economy, I think the biggest thing that we could change first in order to move faster is the area of design, of eco design, as we call it, because the problem with recycling materials is that ultimately recycling is not circular. You know, recycling, you're still losing the virgin raw material, and you're still producing waste, and there's a loss of energy and so on. So recycling sort of is a first step in a way where it delays the amount of waste going, it slows down the loss, but it's ultimately not circular. And the barrier to transitioning from recycling to remanufacturing and to retaining all of the raw materials that are in circulation is the design of the products and what we do with those raw materials. So I think moving at the moment, eco design in terms of legislation is too limited. It focuses mostly on energy efficiency of products and so on. But I think we really need to get into the design of how things are put together, so that when their use is finished, that you can disassemble the parts that they're made of and reuse them quite easily. That's why I mentioned the idea of having modular products that are modular and can be disassembled and reassembled. And the same with designing buildings and so on and so on. You know, that you can retrieve the materials easily. I remember meeting with somebody from the car manufacturing industry, and they explained that in the dashboard of a car, there was something like, I think it was 28 or 29 different polymers of plastic. And so to retrieve them back and all the energy required to put into them to get them back down to single polymers that were a useful raw material wasn't very feasible or practical or whatever. So I think designing products would be a really good place to start, because I think that will have such a knock-on effect on everything else. It would really drive change. That and circular procurement, because governments are spending huge amounts of money procuring things, and they can really influence supply chains if they make demands for circularity in their procurement.
I do think it ties up really nicely with the kind of kick-off session that we had back with Sebastian Levy, if our participants join that, wherein he mentioned that circularity in itself might not be sustainable or feasible exactly. Our next question is about promoting about profitability for companies, basically, that promoting longevity for products may not exactly be profitable, and how companies can be incentivized to do it. Is it only through restriction? And secondary, how can it be feasible at the EU level?
Yeah, well, I think that in terms of profitability, there are practical examples where it is profitable, but where you're shifting the business model away from selling as many things as possible and incentivizing consumers to buy more products, to having a business model where you're leasing, where you're effectively kind of leasing products, you know, where you're retaining ownership of all of the raw materials contained within the product, and you're retrieving those for your business afterwards. At the moment, with the current rules and regulations and with the current kind of economic paradigm that we live within and the principles that we have, profit is king, and it's all about, you know, making as much money as possible. I mean, that's the very basis of the neoliberal economic model that we have. You make it as cheap as possible, and you sell as many of them as possible, and you let somebody else deal with the waste. But I think a change in mindset and a change in regulation, where the materials that products are made of retain a value, then businesses are incentivized to have an interest in retrieving that value from them. Whereas at the moment, once a product is sold and the ownership of that product shifts to the consumer, once their use of that product is finished, let's say it's a device in a kitchen, a washing machine or something, once my use of that washing machine is over, or it breaks, or a piece of it falls off, and it costs me more to replace the piece than to get it fixed because of the way it's designed, then it becomes waste, because it no longer has any ownership attached to it. Whereas I think if the ownership is retained further up the line, either with the manufacturer or with the seller, there's an incentive there then for the product to be designed in a modular way, to be designed so that the raw materials can be retrieved. And these businesses just shift their model so that they then can have a remanufacturing wing or invest in a repair part of their business. And some of the big companies are doing that already. We know Philips have moved to that model with supplying lighting, and I know IKEA have been experimenting with different parts of it as well.
Yeah. Another question is, how can this high-scale systemic change be possible, given that sometimes there is a lack of attention on the part on this problem coming from mainstream political actors?
I think that's really interesting. So how do we make something politically hot and politically incentivized? And I mentioned it a couple of times now. I think it's obvious from my comments as well that my qualifications and my work are in the environmental sector and environmental science, and I try and take lessons from there of how can we incentivize change that we know is good, that makes sense when you kind of look at it in the broad picture, and how can we affect that change? And I think it's through not scaring people, and I think it's through presenting the change as an opportunity. And that's why I describe circular economy as a gentle revolution, because in all the work I've done in circular economy, I get invited to a lot more varied conferences. I get a lot more audiences with groups who I traditionally as an environmentalist would not be invited to speak to, including the mining industry, for example. And I think it's because we don't talk, generally speaking, in circular economy about climate, or we don't talk about increased costs to people. The message on the environment is very often that this is going to cost you more for us to deal with, and this is, it's catastrophic, and unless we do something urgently, there's going to be huge problems associated with it. And that's a very difficult political message to send. Unfortunately, that's human nature. But I think that there is a lot of support for circular economy, and I see it building politically. We have the 2 big action plans from the European Commission, and I think that sets a really good direction for all of Europe. And then within cities, as I know you're discussing as well, and within regions, they're developing roadmaps to how to achieve a circular economy. So I think it's building a lot of momentum already.
Yeah, really insightful. Yes, thank you. That ties up really well with our Circular Cities panel that we have tomorrow. Well, I think that's all from our questions. Thank you very much, Cillian.
No, thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you. And well, yeah.
I think I can take over. Thank you, Cillian. It was really an amazing keynote, and thanks for answering all our questions. I think we can leave you to it. If you want to stay for our next panel, also to digitalization, maybe the people will jump into some of your questions or the ideas you mentioned. So if you want to stay, you're welcome to hear from in the session right now. And yeah, we're just going on with some continuous moderation. So thank you, Cillian.
All right, thanks a million. And I hope you check out the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform website just to see everything that's happening there. It's a good source of information, and our committee as well, because we need young people engaged. We need everybody engaged with this economic and social committee, because it's there as an institution to facilitate you and to help people get engaged. So thanks for the opportunity to share all of that with you today, and I look forward to the rest of the day as well.